Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to review IM John Donaldson's recent tome on Bobby Fischer and his world. Now, I'm going to begin by just a disclaimer. I know John fairly well. I met him in 1989 at the American Open in Los Angeles, and in hindsight, I guess Bobby at that point wouldn't have been too distant from us right there in LA. I generally don't read in my life, I haven't read that many books that are just about chess away from the chessboard. I've stuck to being a student of the game more than the people behind it. And part of the reason I was very much interested in this book is just because I had seen John toil at this thing for well now over a decade. And he'd written several other books, but this book was a particular obsession, and it was the reason why he couldn't do things. He couldn't study with his friends. He couldn't go off to tournaments. He couldn't go play frisbee in the park. It was always like, I'm going to work on my book. And I do think, in hindsight, that John, if he had given all his energy to making GM, he would have made GM. He was that close. And this book became his life's work. And so it was really interesting to me to see what it was about. He's written a number of other books, but by far this was the one where he dedicated the most energy to it. Now, as an introduction to John, maybe the easiest way, the insight I got into the guy, the easiest way to understand him is when you go into his house in Berkeley, it's like a shrine to obscure chess literature. There's not that much printed chess literature even left these days, but what's left of it is all in John's house, just wall to wall, and his poor wife is just jammed in with all this stuff. And, we're talking about pamphlets, like, for example, back in the day, every state would have its own chess newsletter. Like, I came from New Mexico and there was the Desert Night, and John surely has copies of all those things, all those little state organizations. And just to see how his mind works, like, when he thinks of me, he thinks of me as like, oh, this one of the top talents from New Mexico, and he can name the other people from the state as well as he can from other, small chess states. He knows all the names and has kind of a mind for that kind of thing. So, with that said, I'm going to begin by saying what I think is the most critical, maybe damning thing about the book. And that is that I think if you wanted to ask what kind of a book it is a hagiography. Now, just to explain, a hagiography back in, the olden days was a study of a saint. And what they would do is, they'd kind of catalog everything the saint had done and question what happened to his relics, his reliquiae, his fingernails, whatever became of the guy. They wanted to know, and that was what a hagiography was. And today we use the word usually in a very dismissive sense. For example, in the literature world, when a new book is published about General Lee from the Civil War, and they're asking about his horse and what became of the horse's descendants and all this other paraphernalia of the guy's life that doesn't seem to center on a question that the author is trying to figure out, but rather, this whole tapestry of paraphernalia around a guy's life. That was what we call a hagiography. Now, in this book's case, where we get that is like John has consumed a lot of energy and brings it out in the book of finding like old score sheets, old Fischer stuff, tracking it down. What happened to this? What happened to that? And it's also unclear to me what John's driving questions are. What is he trying to answer? There's so much that you could, go for. And I think, reading the book, that it was mostly like, what can I find out about Fischer that isn't already known? I think that if I could put it in my own words, that's what he was on about. And when someone reads it, I think, that doesn't know anything about Fischer, there's a lot of things that just get swept under the rug, a lot of the big moments, because John feels they're already covered. For example, John just mentions in passing when Fischer first sweeps the U.S. championships, with no draws and all wins. Because other people have talked about it, as well known, let's move on, right? And so he's going to move on to those things that he has uncovered. Now, one thing, maybe just to hold up as something I would like, and this is like, I don't know how this would quite be done, but it would be interesting, to have somebody really go in there and ask questions. For example, there's a lot of my favorite biography is actually 4 tomes. It's not even complete yet, and this is Caro on Johnson, President Johnson. And what is that? What is the book's project's task? It's to find out what is power. How does power work, right? And then there's chapters on specific players that were related to the guy, and it goes really deep in the way that John does with the resources, with the practical, the primary sources, getting down to what was the truth, what happened. And as an example, I think it would be interesting to put together a chapter about Regina, Fischer's mom. What was she on about? What was her worldview? What was it about? I want a sense of what that is. What was this worldwide Church of God that Fischer fell into? Give me a fuller description. It's really amazing to me, especially when you look back at the interviews of Fischer. You can find it on YouTube, talking to, talk show hosts in like 1971. And it's right at this moment where he's elevated his game, but at the same time, he's literally just given so much of his money away to these people who think that the next coming, the end of the world, is coming very quickly. And, who were those people? Another person that's so weird that needs, I think, some exploration is Lombardi. And Lombardi really had such a parallel path to Fischer. Ended up homeless on the streets, and also, 10 years or at least or something like that, being a priest before he got out of that business. Kind of the way Fischer was sucked into that, to his own religious world, which, you don't really see when you're seeing the interviews. You don't see any hint of that weirdness. It's just one of the things that's so amazing about him. He's got this charisma when you see him in the old interviews. And then finally, in his Descent of Madness, it's very hard for me to listen to those interviews, but I think it would be an interesting question to actually sincerely ask, what did the guy believe? I mean, it's so weird. This, like, when you try to put it all together, imagine there's all these threads of his mind and they're going all this stuff. And obviously there's anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. But I mean, I guess I want, give me a picture of how the guy actually saw the world. It'd be really, it's fascinating to me. Especially, did he give up the weird religious belief stuff? I really don't know. Now, it sounds like I'm criticizing the book, but I want to say I really enjoyed it. I went through the book, and it really helped me understand that for me, as an American chess player, Fischer is like an avatar. Somebody out there who did something amazing and also has personal qualities that draw not only me but other people to think about him. And it's not just the good qualities. Like, the descent into madness is just interesting. It's fascinating, and maybe it's morbid that we're stuck on it, but it's just this thing that continues to pull people into him. And you contrast it with both the chess playing world's obsession with him compared to other chess players. And Fischer has this eternal draw to him. Definitely Beth Harmon was created, on Fischer. The descent, the kind of like the burden of the genius, this kind of story. And no one had his charisma at the same time too. So, he becomes this really interesting person for me. And I think the real value, what I got out of the book, is John has this great collection of people who talk about their interactions with Fischer and how they were personally moved and how he changed really their view of life, and how for them it was a spiritual moment meeting this guy, having an interaction with them. And there's so many stories that I really found it fascinating. And so this is the fundamental collection of source material that John has put together. And I guess there's even going to be a second one. Now, I want to conclude just by saying, a lot of times, even though I got Fischer hanging up in the wall behind me, I don't really think about it too much. And then at times it's not always evident to me, but I'm just going to tell this story. There's this thing that John puts at the very end of the book. And it's about Patti Smith going to visit Fischer in Iceland. Fischer's totally insane by this point, man. I mean, was he insane? I don't know. Whatever. We can debate about it. But in any case, the guy was hard to talk to because he's always ranting about his conspiracy theories. Patti Smith met the guy in 1966 at some bookstore when she was a kid and working there, and he was doing a promotion for Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess, and had him in his mind the entire time, like a lot of these other people in the book, just like a real fascination with him. And I just thought it was really, amazing and interesting what she said. And then I went downstairs and I was reading it to my wife, and I found myself bawling. And it was really interesting. I was like, wow, how did that happen to me? And I think what happened was, it was like me reading out loud to my wife, who's not a chess player, was like me trying to express who I wanted Bobby Fischer to be, and Patti Smith was expressing it for me in words that I didn't have myself and in words I didn't trust myself to say, right? So in that way, I feel like Bobby is my avatar in some way. I'm not a religious person, but if there's some kind of spiritual thing out there, Bobby's one of them. And in that way, I have to say that John is a priest, right? He is the one who is, the intermediary between me and Bobby. So I'm just going to read this thing. Again, this is a story of Patti Smith searching out Bobby Fischer, and she says he comes to her at like midnight at this restaurant with a hooded parka on and stuff, and he goes on racially repellent stuff right at the beginning just to test her out, and she's like, dude, you're wasting your time. I can be just as repellent as you. I just do it on other subjects. Sits a while, he's quiet, takes off the hood and asks, do you know any Buddy Holly songs? It's just like, it's totally amazing. So then they start singing. And then in a different interview, this is what she says. I'm just going to read it. I'm going to try not to cry. I'm going to end the video. All right. So, through the night, we must have sung 100 songs. The Gylites, the Four Tops, Chuck Berry, Darlene Love, all these old songs. He knew every lyric to every 50s rock song, to every Motown song. He had all the dance moves. He still possessed the heart of the kid who dressed in sharkskin. The kid who beat the old fellows at chess in Washington Square for money to buy tickets to the Brooklyn Fox and Paramount. We had a good time. I watched him pull on his parka as we said goodbye. He was somewhat shattered and paranoid, yet within those dark eyes, the intelligence, rage, and humor that he possessed as a young grandmaster still burned. No one owned him. He was a force that could not be contained. Genius is dangerous. Those that think it can be packaged are fools.